10 AM on December 21st marked the start of one of the most anticipated Splatoon 3 tournaments of this year. A tournament where some of the best players in Japan would battle for the title of Gachi King or something. I don't know, I can't read Japanese and it's not important, because what is important is that 6 months prior, Splatoon 3 received its final content update, marking the end of the 2 years that it was promised. But this couldn't be it, could it? There has to be more. There's no way they make Splatoon 3 and don't add third kits. If they're going to add third kits, an official Nintendo tournament is the best place to do it. I mean, they've done it before, why not again? And then the tournament happened, ended, and nothing. To the dismay of a lot of people. So, why were we so desperate for third kits? Splatoon 3's update cycle followed a very rigid structure. Unlike the previous games, it followed a seasonal structure, as in would get content drops every 3 months, compared to Splatoon 2 where we get a new weapon every week. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. A seasonal approach, for example, allows for a lot of build-up and hype around the released content. For a game that you're expected to play for a long time like Splatoon, big content drops have the potential to really shake things up with a bunch of new and interesting weapons. There are downsides though, like the long content droughts that you will get between releases, but whether or not it's the right choice depends on what you want out of the game. No system is perfect, but you still have to choose one of them. So I'm not here to look at the seasonal model itself. Instead, I want to look at its execution. Success of the model hinges a lot on the amount of content you plan on adding to the game. If I'm going to wait for 3 months for this season that you've built up so much hype around, you better be adding a ton of stuff. And you can probably see where I'm going with this. The main attraction of each new season was its weapon kits and its maps, of which they added 10-ish new kits and 2 new maps. This video is about kits, so I'm only looking at the kits here, and, well, 10 isn't a lot. Not really. Sure, we're getting 10 new weapon kits, but very little of these kits is actually new. If we get a new main weapon or a new special weapon, or both, that can be new content. But for the majority of these kits, the new content wasn't new content as much as it was a reorganization of existing content. And I don't mean to diminish the effort that went into making these kits. They put a lot of effort into making each variant visually distinct from their base form. But mechanically, all the new kit is a reshuffling of stuff already in the game. You'd think they'd be able to add a bit more, especially since Splatoon 2 was releasing 1 new weapon kit a week, leading to Splatoon 2 releasing weapons faster than Splatoon 3. Thanks to the poor quantity, a lot of Splatoon 3 seasons, I dare say most of them, felt very underwhelming. Now, the solution to this isn't just adding more kits to the game. Adding lots of kits isn't going to be enough on its own. You could randomly generate 100 new kits to be added to the game, but most of them would be rubbish. You might get a few matches out of them before you drop them for something better and more fun. In fact, let's do that right now. What if they added a Sploosh-o-matic with, I don't know, Beacon and Killer Whale? Like, sure, this is a new kit. It makes the kitometer tick up slightly, but this hypothetical kit would be rubbish. It has no synergy, no purpose, it's not fun to play with or against. You could argue there is some fun in playing it, that you could run around being a little rat and placing beacons everywhere, but there are other weapons that can do that. This kit does very little that is new and unique, making its addition less meaningful than it might initially seem. Now again, don't get me wrong. Neo Sploosh can be a fun kit, but when you're getting 10 new kits in a season, each one has to be a verified and certified banger, else it's going to feel like a waste. In order for 10 kits a season to be done right, each kit really needs to reimagine a weapon, to take something you thought you already knew and shake it up. A good example of this is actually Wiper Deco. It takes an otherwise very aggressive in-your-face weapon and attempts to make it a support. That's really interesting. Forge Pro is another, perhaps a bit more subtle example. Giving it Booyah Bomb opens it up to a lot more aggressive plays, as it now has access to a shield that can keep it alive should it find itself in a difficult position, something that the previous one kind of could do, but Crab definitely incentivized sitting further back. If every kit was like Wiper Deco or Forge Pro, that would be amazing. We wouldn't get many new kits, but each one would challenge the way we think about each main weapon or its components in a way that might actually keep us entertained for the next 3 months. Instead, we get weapons like Neo Splash-o-matic, where it has a near identical kit to Tentatek, or we get kits like Dreadringer D, a kit that doesn't really change how we think about the main weapon or force us to play around it differently. In a lot of these seasons, we were just getting filler kits. This can get frustrating when you wait 3 months only for a season that feels like filler. With kits like these, it really makes us think about what we could have gotten instead. Scripting that last section I found quite difficult. When trying to think of superfluous kits, or kits that had weird incongruities, I got that right? Incongruity. Probably. My mind would keep jumping back to kits like L3D or Reflux Echo. Kits that I'm sure a lot of us agree are quite bad, but kits I can't exactly say are poorly designed. Take Reflux, for example. Reflux Echo on its release was called one of, if not the very worst kit in the game. And I mean, come on, it's hard to disagree when we're talking about Splash Wall or Reef Slider. But in theory, it can't be that bad, right? Like, V-Flux is kind of weird because it's defined by its special, Tenta Missiles. It pushes it into a more paint-heavy support role, which is fine, honestly. Its tap shots have really good paint, especially when grounded, which, funnily enough, makes it a top-tier pick in Turf War, since it's one of the quickest weapons at painting your spawn, while also having an infinite range special, so it can help your team while in spawn. But the main weapon of Reflux isn't just about paint. It has a really fast strafe speed, a quick one-shot kill, decent short-range AoE with its tap shots and half charges. This main weapon is actually really good at fighting, but a strength that is very often overlooked, thanks to its kit. Knowing this, Reflux Echo seems like it should actually be a good kit in theory. Splash Wall helps in safely challenging other players, and Reef Slider incentivizes more aggressive play, putting you in range to make use of your good combat stats. The Deco kit feels like a kit designed to play towards Reflux's strengths in combat, but is one of the worst kits in the game. Why is that? It's not Splash Wall. Like, I'm not a Reflux player, but it's not that bad. In that case then, it kind of has to be Reef Slider. And sure enough, Reef Slider is what we in the biz call a kit killer. A sub or special that will ensure that whatever kit it is on will never see the light of day. Reef Slider, throughout the history of Splatoon 3, has been considered one of, if not the worst specials in the game, being at the bottom of nearly every tier list. Even though Reef Slider is now in a bit of a better spot, it is still incredibly polarizing, limiting, and just, it's not really a special most weapons want given the option. Like, sure, a bunch of buffs have overtuned some aspects of the special, but overtuned doesn't mean desirable or good. Aerospray, Dreadringer, S-Blast, Reflux Echo all immediately come to mind as kits that feel as though they are being brought down by having Reef Slider. Reef isn't the only example of this. Line Marker and Toxic Mist are some good examples. We also have Hammer, which should be a good aggressive special on paper, but is so inconsistent that the kits that should work in theory, like L3D and V-Mini, feel like completely dead kits. Even the kits that like Hammer, like Inkbrush Nouveau and Wiper, still feel as though they'd rather something else like Splashdown. While these kits aren't necessarily bad, when our kit choices are so limited, they can definitely leave us wanting for something a bit more. It's difficult to talk about a kit's balance without also talking about how it changes over time. Balance patches exist and serve to change what is and isn't strong over time. Splatoon 3's balance patches were tied very closely to Splatoon 3 seasons. We'd get 2 patches per season, one right before the season releases, mostly to add all the new content, and one in between seasons. It's nice that they did a mid-season patch and not just rebalance things when they added new stuff, and again, I appreciate that. Unfortunately though, a mid-season patch isn't enough, because it means we have 6 weeks between balance patches, a very long stretch of time. But to put this into perspective, there is another game that I play quite often that has a similar style of content cycle to Splatoon, called Teamfight Tactics, or TFT as I'll be calling it going forward, not to be confused with TF2. TFT gets a new set every 4 months or so, and a set you can think of as a season, but an actual impactful season where they change everything. A bit longer than Splatoon 3 seasons, but despite this, TFT gets a balance patch every 2 weeks or so. They even have a system of B patches and C patches. Balance patches they can release at any time should there be a dire balance issue that can't wait and needs fixing as soon as possible. A good example of this is Cinder from set 12. On release, this unit was so strong that players who won were the players who played around this unit the best, which isn't a healthy state for the game to be in. Tacticooler. TFT has systems in place to ensure they can quickly respond to balance concerns, a system Splatoon 3 doesn't have, given how rigidly it sticks to its 1 patch per 6 weeks structure. Just like with kits, having a patch every 6 weeks means that each patch really has to be a certified and verified banger. And I don't mean balance flashing. I don't want it to be that every 6 weeks the meta gets the biggest shakeup it's ever seen ever. It just means that these patches really need to ensure that the strongest options, especially the oppressive options, are brought down to a reasonable level as soon as possible. This obviously hasn't happened. Pencil is, for example, a very dominant and oppressive backline. It has been top of the meta for well over a year now, with a very strong presence. In fact, its presence is keeping most Splatlings out of the meta and makes any charger that isn't Pencil very hard to justify. Since its rise, it has received 2 incredibly minor nerfs, which hasn't changed its standing in the slightest. But balance is really important, not just because it keeps the strong weapons and compositions in check, but also to give weaker options their chance to become relevant. Mortdog, the senior game design director for TFT, will very often state in his patch rundown videos that the point of certain buffs is to give an underserved unit a chance in the spotlight. Splatoon 3 just hasn't done this, at least not effectively. Undercover Umbrella is a weapon that hasn't been relevant since 2019. Throughout all of Splatoon 3's life, it has been bottom tier. Even after getting a surprisingly decent second kit with Torpedo and Screen, ignoring Screen's problems here for a sec, it still found itself as a bottom of the barrel weapon. Throughout Splatoon 3's life, Undercover received 3 buffs. These buffs were spread very far apart. The first happened about a year after the game's launch, the second happened 4 months after that, and the third happened another 10 months after that. A long wait would be fine if each buff left Undercover in a healthy spot, but none of them did that. These buffs were incredibly minor and essentially did nothing to change the overall strength of Undercover, leaving it a bottom of the barrel weapon for its entire life. This is the story of so many of Splatoon 3's weak weapons, and a symptom of Splatoon 3's slow balance. When you're waiting 6 weeks just to get a patch so small it can fit on your phone screen, with changes so minor, weapons are keeping their meta standings for well over a year, of course people are going to be crying out for third kits, because with patches slowing down, third kits feel like our last chance for so many of these weapons to finally shine.